All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ethan Schneider. I am an advocacy intern with Churches for Middle East Peace, who is supporting this webinar. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CMEP, we are a coalition of more than 30 national church denominations and organizations in the U.S. committed to pursuing security, justice, and equality in Palestine, Israel, and the broader Middle East. We are based out of Washington, D.C., and help church organizations, leaders, and individuals nationwide advocate in an effective way to express their concerns about justice and peace for all people in the region. Our advocacy work is concentrated in three areas: holistic peace building, humanitarian and economic assistance, and human rights. Joining us today as our webinar host is Julie Schumacher-Cohen, who has long been engaged in Israel-Palestine peace building and advocacy. Julie has previously worked as the Deputy Director of CMEP, where she was heavily involved in our legislative advocacy work. Julie was responsible for building a large network of congressional offices and collaborating with Jewish and Arab American peace organizations. Currently, Julie is the Assistant Vice President for Community Engagement and Government Affairs at the University of Scranton. She leads community-based learning, political dialogue, refugee accompaniment, and other civic engagement and narrative change initiatives. She is a member of the Catholic Advisory Council of Churches for Middle East Peace and the Board of Directors of Foundation for Middle East Peace. So on that note, I'd like to pass things along to Julie herself. Julie?
Great. Thank you so much, Ethan. And also thanks to the CMEP staff for making today's webinar possible. I have very fond memories of my time at CMEP in the Methodist building on Capitol Hill. And so I'm grateful to be able to continue that work in a small way now with my volunteer role as a member of CMEP's Catholic Advisory Council. For those who may not be familiar, the purpose of the Catholic Advisory Council is to work in support of political and socioeconomic conditions that favor the permanence of Christians in the Holy Land, and to engage in advocacy and education among American Catholics to promote U.S. policies toward a just and lasting peace. And so the council is comprised of clergy, academics, NGO leaders. I know a few of them are on today. And so I'm especially glad to be able to introduce and moderate today's webinar with our esteemed guest, Raful Rofa of the Society of St. Yves. He's joining us from Jerusalem, and I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. I just want to say a few words about why we chose to do this webinar and our topic today. We're gathering at what I think is a very important and critical time, and our topic is Unholy Rights, exploring the current realities and challenges in the Holy Land, including freedom of worship for Palestinians, both Christian and Muslim, in the Old City of Jerusalem, issues of family reunification, land confiscation, the taxing of churches, and the current state of equality and human rights. I was just in Israel, Palestine in March for the first time since right before the pandemic, and in the 20 years that I've been traveling to the Holy Land, it was the most combustible that I've ever experienced it, with an emboldened settler movement and constant Israeli military incursions into the West Bank, and this is after 2022 was already the deadliest year for Palestinians since the Second Intifada. I heard from Palestinian and Israeli civil society leaders about the unsustainability of the current realities on the ground, and from Palestinian Christians about increased attacks on Christian sites and efforts by settler groups to erode and diminish the presence and witness of the Palestinian Christian community. So in this context, where there is no active peace process, where the democracy protests within Israel, as significant as they are, largely fail to address Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and inequalities for Palestinians within Israel. In this context, the work of human rights organizations is more important than ever, especially as we consider in the future how to ensure that everyone in the Holy Land, Palestinian and Israeli, can enjoy equality and human dignity. And so again, we're grateful and honored to have with us today someone who is doing this important work to defend and promote human rights in the Holy Land, and to do so as part of the call of Catholic social teaching to solidarity, to justice, and to the common good. So let me say a few words about our speaker. Mr. Raful Rofa is the General Director of the Society of St. Yves. This is the Catholic Human Rights Center for Legal Resources and Development working under the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem. He was admitted to the Israeli bar in 2003. He holds a master's degree in law from the University of London and was admitted as a solicitor of the Supreme Court of England and Wales in 2007. He has been practicing law for 20 years in matters that relate to the human rights of Palestinians in East Jerusalem and in Area C of the West Bank. Founded in 1991, the Society strives toward a social order that values the dignity of all people in the Holy Land. It promotes human and civil rights by providing legal assistance, counsel, and advocacy to the poor, needy, and politically oppressed Palestinian population in Jerusalem and the southern West Bank. The Society's programs address micro and macro legal problems stemming from the occupation, and I mentioned a few of the issues that we'll have a chance to talk about today. So thank you so much for your work, Raful. We look forward to your presentation and an opportunity for conversation today. So after his opening remarks, we will be able to take questions from the audience. You can use the Q&A chat and we'll take the questions from there. The Q&A or the chat is fine either way. So thank you so much, Raful, and I'll turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you very much and good evening, everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Raful Rafa. I'm a lawyer and the director of the Society of St. Eve's Catholic Human Rights Center, working out of Jerusalem, in particular the old city of Jerusalem next to the Latin Patriarchate. St. Eve's was established, as was mentioned, in 1991 by a canonical decree issued by the former Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, His Beatitude Michel Sabah, to provide legal aid and assistance to the poor, oppressed, and marginalized of the Holy Land, without regard to their gender, color, religion, etc. The Society of St. Eve's works in East Jerusalem and in Area C of the West Bank, concentrating on legal matters that relate to the daily lives of Palestinians and stem out of the occupation. So in East Jerusalem, we work on matters that relate to family, to the whole issue of Palestinian residency, which includes family unification, child registration, and residency revocation. We also work on social and economic rights, concentrating on the benefits that are given by the state of Israel to its residents, including Palestinians living in East Jerusalem. And these benefits include such things as state health insurance and the different benefits such as unemployment benefit, child benefit, disability benefit, etc. For two reasons. One, because we tend to help the poorer segments of society. And secondly, because this issue is tightly connected to the issue of Palestinian residency in Jerusalem, for it being an important proof of Palestinians living in Jerusalem when they want to acquire any service from the Israeli Ministry of Interior, including family unification or child registration, or even getting an identity card. We also, in Jerusalem, work on the issue of demolitions, house demolitions, or building demolitions that are owned by Palestinians, concentrating on the planning side of things. So we tend to represent Palestinians who built illegally according to the Israeli building and planning law, and that is because historically the Jerusalem municipality has not planned properly, or has not planned at all for Palestinians in East Jerusalem until recently. In Area C of the West Bank, we work on three main issues. The issue of, again, house demolition due to lack or improper planning by the Israeli civil administration, i.e. the Israeli army, for Palestinians in Area C. The issue of freedom of movement and the permit regime, where we assist Palestinians who wish to either access Jerusalem or Israel, or to travel overseas and who have security or police preventions from removing these preventions in order to allow them to get permits to access, as I said, Israel, Jerusalem, or travel overseas via Jordan. And the third main issue is the topic of settler violence, where we assist people who, or Palestinians who suffered from settler violence, to submit complaints to the police in an effort to try and get these people justice. We also used to have a main component which related to land confiscation, concentrating on, again, on privately owned land that is being, or that was confiscated by the Israeli civil administration for the purposes and declaring these lands state land, and eventually many of these lands are turned over to settlements and become and settlements are built on them. As you can see, our St. Ives field of operations is quite wide, and we do deal with quite a lot of matters. So, and since we are I was asked to concentrate on certain issues, so I'm going to start off by talking about the issue of family unification and the whole issue of Palestinian residency in East Jerusalem. So, as you might know, after the year 1967, Palestinians in East Jerusalem were given by the State of Israel the status of permanent residents of the State of Israel rather than citizens of the State of Israel. This legal status is a weak one under Israeli law, since it allows the Israeli Minister of the Interior to revoke the residency of Palestinians who have this status if one of three things happen. If they leave the State of Israel for 7 years, not necessarily continuous, and leaving the State of Israel and Jerusalem means also them going to live in Bethlehem, in the West Bank, in Bethlehem or in Ramallah, because Israel regards these cities as leaving Jerusalem, which leaves the Palestinian who went to live there vulnerable, and in that it allows the Minister of the Interior to revoke their residency. Another way in which the Minister of the Interior can revoke residency is through if a Palestinian who is a permanent resident travels overseas and acquires permanent residency in any country in the world. And the third way, if that Palestinian who's a permanent resident acquires the citizenship of any country in the world. So we at St. Ives have dealt with many cases where we assisted people to regain their residency, either because they lost it by leaving Jerusalem for 7 years, or because many became American citizens, and they wanted to come back. So we assisted several to acquire the residency back in Jerusalem, even after they acquired American or the American citizenship or any or other citizenships, including British and German and others. Now, until a few years ago, the regaining of the residency was not a simple matter. It was back in, can't remember the year now, but it's already several years ago that the Israeli High Court said that Palestinians from East Jerusalem are quasi-citizens, and they are the natives of this land, and therefore, when should a Palestinian who's a permanent resident lose his or her residency through the work of this law, the entry into Israel law and its regulations, then it is possible for them to regain their residency in Jerusalem if they come back and prove that their center of life is Jerusalem for at least 2 continuous years. Then they can apply to have their residency back. And most recently, a friend of mine who went to the States after he finished school, He studied there and worked there for about 30 years, and then he decided to come back with his family to Jerusalem. When he came back, his residency was revoked, so we helped him to apply for to have his residency back. It took nearly 3 years. After 3 years, and after a lot of inquiry by the Minister of Interior and a lot of questions and hearings, they decided to give him back his residency on a temporary basis for 2 years, after which, if he still continues to live in Jerusalem, then he will regain his permanent residency. And not only that, after he regains his residency, he will be able to register his daughter in the Israeli population registry and apply for family unification to his wife, who is originally from Bethlehem. Now, you have to keep in mind that Palestinians from Jerusalem are not immigrants into the state of Israel. It was the state of Israel after the 1967 war that came to them, that occupied East Jerusalem, and it was Israel that decided to give the Palestinians of East Jerusalem this precarious legal status. So treating the Palestinians from East Jerusalem as if they are immigrants who immigrated to Israel and giving them a status of permanent residency, which is a weak legal status which allows the Minister of Interior to revoke it, is contrary to international law, because the international law obliges the occupying power to preserve and legally protect the occupied people. Now, between 1967 and now, and today, Israel has revoked roughly around 15,000 residencies of Palestinians in East Jerusalem. This, if you think that these 15,000 people who lost their residency in Jerusalem got married and have children, so obviously the number is much larger than the 15,000. Going on to talk about the issue of family unification. Now, one of the most important preconditions for anyone to be able to apply for family unification to his or her spouse is for them to be a resident of the state of Israel. If they are not residents, they will not be allowed to, or they're not able to apply for family unification for their spouse who is either from the Palestinian territories or even from any other country overseas. The whole process of family unification was a simple one until the middle of the 1990s, when during the first Netanyahu administration, the Israeli government at the time decided to introduce something called the gradual process, which was meant to last for 5.25 years, after which the non-Israeli spouse, and here when I say Israeli, it means either Israeli citizen or permanent resident, got the same legal status as their Israeli spouse. However, practice proved that it is the 5.25 years did not actually take 5.25 years. Some people who applied back in the middle of the 1990s to have their spouse, who applied for family unification to their spouse who's not Israeli according to the definition of the law, were not able, the Israeli Ministry of Interior did not abide by the 5.25 year rule, and some people are still until this day going through the process. And that's because people were physically unable to gain access to the offices of the Ministry of Interior in East Jerusalem. The number of staff in the office were inadequate. On several occasions, the office of the Minister of Interior in Jerusalem got caught fire, and files were burnt, documents were lost, and people had to apply and reapply. And eventually, in 2002, when during the second uprising, when the State of Israel decided to freeze family unification applications altogether, and then in 2003 enacted the Citizenship and Entry into Israel Law temporary ordinance, which was meant to last for 1 year. However, the 1 year hasn't ended until now. This whole issue made it much more difficult for Palestinians to apply for family unification to their spouses, in particular the spouses who are residents of the Palestinian Authority. Now, this law basically prohibits family unification applications between Israelis and the residents of the Palestinian Authority and the citizens of the states of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. However, the law gives an exception to the residents of the Palestinian Authority who are from the West Bank, provided they satisfy the age category. Now, if we're talking about the wife who's from the West Bank, then she must be 25 years or above. If we're talking about the husband must be 35 years or above. If they do not satisfy the age category, then the application will be rejected ab initio, without looking at anything else. It will be rejected. Of course, the law specifies that those Palestinians who cooperated and assisted and worked for the security of the State of Israel can also apply for family unifications. Now, when it comes to Gaza, there's a total prohibition on the application of family unification between Israelis and Palestinians who are residents of Gaza. And that is true ever since Hamas took over the rule in Gaza. Now, on top of satisfying the age category, of course, the applicants must prove that the center of life is Israel, or including East Jerusalem, according to the law. And people prove that by providing documents such as water bills, different types of bills, water, electricity, gas, proof that they own or rent a house or a flat in Jerusalem or in Israel, proof that the National Insurance Institute, which is the institute that is responsible for giving the benefits that I mentioned earlier, recognizes them as, or recognize the spouse who's from Jerusalem as resident, and gives this spouse all the entitlements that she or he is entitled to. It can be state health insurance, child benefit, or any other benefit that he or she might be entitled to. On top of that, they have to show that their children attend school in Jerusalem, and if they have babies, that the babies get their inoculations in Jerusalem and not elsewhere, i.e. not in the West Bank. On top of that, they have to satisfy the security and criminal requirements, but not only them, the couple themselves and their families. Now, the law defines family as the parents of the couple, their siblings, their brothers and sisters, their spouses, their own children, or children that they might have had from that marriage, or children that they might have had from other marriages. If any one of these people has got a security or a criminal record, then the family unification application will be rejected, notwithstanding the fact that the couple themselves are free of such a hindrance. Now, this issue of rejecting a family unification on the strength of a family member having, in particular, a security prevention, was challenged in front of the Israeli High Court. And the Israeli High Court said that when the Ministry of the Interior decides that it wants to reject a family unification application on the strength of a security prevention on a member of the family, then the spouse, who is normally from the West Bank, must, the couple themselves must be called to a hearing in the Ministry of the Interior, and the spouse who's from the West Bank must be given the opportunity to cut all ties with the family member that has or members that have the security prevention. If that spouse agrees to do so, then they are asked to sign on a legally binding undertaking to that effect. And if they breach that undertaking, then not only will the family unification application be rejected, but also they will be criminally liable for breaching that undertaking. Just to give you an idea how things work, once I was representing a wife whose husband is from the West Bank, and they were getting family unification approvals until one day the Israeli Ministry of the Interior decided to refuse or reject their application, stating security reasons. So after exchanging legal correspondence with the Israeli Ministry of Interior without getting any result, we petitioned the Jerusalem District Court, sitting as an administrative court, asking the court to reinstate the whole process of family unification. When on the day of the hearing, the Minister of the Interior came with 3 witnesses who are Secret Service personnel, and the lawyer representing the Minister of Interior asked that their testimonies be heard without us being present in the in court. So I objected. I said, how can I defend my beneficiary or my client if I don't hear what these witnesses have to say? The judge's answer to me was, you have 2 options. You either trust me and trust that I will give the best decision after I hear what they have to say, or you and your client refuse to leave the court, and I will give a decision here and now, rejecting your petition. So after consulting with the beneficiary, we left. About after an hour, we were called back in, and the judge asked me if I have anything else to say besides what I wrote in the petition. I told her, well, I don't, because you asked us to leave, and we left. I can only say that, my client and her husband have no security, have no legal, have no security problems, no criminal record, and the court should accept the our petition and reinstate the process of family unification. So afterwards, the judge gave her decision, and it was to reject our petition, stating that due to the secret evidence that she heard, the only thing that she can do is reject our petition, and that the evidence given by these three secret service personnel must not be part of the public transcript of the hearing. After inquiring further into the matter, it turned out that one of the brothers of the husband, who's from West Bank, was in prison for being a member of Hamas. Not the husband himself, but his brother. This is an example of how things are dealt with in this matter. Of course, one of the most disturbing things that relates to the issue of family unification is the issue of children who are born to those families, to these families who are going through the process of family unification, and who have problems, in particular, proving that the center of life is Jerusalem. If the parents can't prove that the center of life is Jerusalem, then they are not able to register their children in the Israeli population registry, which means that these children can attain adulthood and still be unregistered and officially non-existent, which means that they are not able to live proper lives, they are not able to get proper education, they are not able to get proper medical treatment, they are not able to get any of the benefits that are given by the National Insurance Institute, and most importantly, they are not able to move freely, because if they are not registered, that means that they are not able to have an identity card. That means that if they are always at risk of being detained by the police because they can't prove who they are and where do they live, and many of them live basically in a big prison in the cities that they live in. So I remember the case of one young man who was not registered and whose parents were going through the process of family unification. He attained adulthood without being registered. And when we spoke to him, he says, I know who I am. I know my name is Muhammad. I know who my parents are, but officially I do not exist. I like to play football here meaning soccer for the I joined the team in order to be able to play with them. However, I was not able to go to the football matches because I don't have an identity card, and of course, traveling with the football team means going through checkpoints and military checkpoints, and so he was not able to get proper education, and the citizenship and entry to Israel law made it more difficult to register children, in that it specifies that it is possible for a child to attain permanent residency. I'm talking here about a child who was born to a parent who's from East Jerusalem and who's a permanent resident. If that parent applies before that child attains the age of 14, and the application is approved. Of course, in order to approve the application, they have to prove the center of life, that the center of life is Jerusalem, etc., etc. If they are not able to register the child before the age of 14, then between the ages of 14 and 18, the parent who's from Jerusalem can apply for family unification to that child. And if that application is approved, then the only thing that that child can get is a temporary permit, which allows them to stay with their family in Jerusalem. If that child attains the age of 18, then there is nothing that can be done to register them. Nothing at all. That's it about family unification. I want to talk briefly about the issue of taxing the churches. Now, taxing the churches is a new, old topic. And taxing the churches goes back to the days of the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman Empire decided that it will not tax the churches and other religious institutions I don't know what the reasons were at the time, and this continued as a status quo during the British Mandate, and then in East Jerusalem and the West Bank during the time of Jordan, when Jordan ruled East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And when Israel occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank, it stated that it will abide and conform and accept the status quo of not taxing the churches and other institutions. This continued until recently, when the different municipalities, including the Jerusalem municipality, Haifa municipality, and others, decided that they wanted to enforce the collection of the Arnona tax. Now, the Arnona tax is the municipal tax, and it is one of the taxes that was not paid by the churches and in its institutions until as per the status quo. And the Jerusalem municipality, for example, decided to take, before that, the Jerusalem municipality has, over many years, sent out requests for the payment of this tax. And as per the status quo, the churches and its institutions received them and didn't pay. Until recently, when the Jerusalem municipality decided to take legal action against several institutions, including St. Yves, and took the matter to court. Now, legally, under Israeli law, it is not possible to prevent the payment of these taxes, because Israeli law as it stands now doesn't provide for an exemption to the churches or its institutions for the payment of this tax. And in the past, when the Jerusalem municipality and others required the churches or its institutions to pay, then people from the churches would go up to the municipality, tell them of the status quo, tell them of the, I forgot to mention that there are negotiations, in particular, pertaining to the Catholic Church in particular. There are negotiations going on between the State of Israel and the Holy See regarding a bilateral agreement that regulates the relationship between the Holy See and the State of Israel. It includes many things, and one of the things that this agreement should include is the whole issue of taxation. And the negotiations have been taking place for many years and they haven't finished until now. So when in the past the municipalities took action in order for the churches or its institutions to pay the taxes, a letter would be issued from by the apostolic delegation to the effect that there are negotiations going on, and the negotiations eventually should lead to an agreement which should regulate the whole issue of taxation. And once the agreement is reached, the church and its institutions will pay taxation according to this agreement. Now, recently, the Jerusalem municipality decided not to wait and took legal action to against several, as I said, several Christian institutions. The matter is still in court. However, there are diplomatic efforts that are being carried out in order to convince the State of Israel to withdraw these legal actions that are that have been lodged with the Jerusalem Magistrates Court, stating the status quo, stating the fact that the negotiations are still going on. Letters were sent to the President of the State of Israel and others asking them to intervene. And we'll see how things will progress. The main thing is that the Jerusalem municipality decided to break the status quo. That's one thing. Now, the big fear is that other institutions in the State of Israel decide to take action regarding the whole issue of taxation. The taxation of the church lands, which again fall within the status quo of being exempt from payment. If the State of Israel decides that church land should be taxed retroactively, the way they did with the issue of the Arnona, then we are talking about taxes that go up to hundreds of millions of US dollars, which means that the churches could lose their properties. This is the big fear. Another big fear is that the churches and its institutions are required to pay retroactively again the employer's tax. As you might know, the churches in the Holy Land employ a large number of people in the churches themselves and in its institutions. And I'm talking here about all the churches, not only the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, the Anglican Church, the Coptic Church, everyone. And again, if the tax authorities in Israel decide to take legal action against the churches asking for this tax, this means that the churches will be liable to pay again hundreds of millions of shekels, which will mean that many churches will go bankrupt, and many of its institutions will basically shut down. I don't know if I have much more time. I can talk about many other things, but I see that we've got only about a quarter of an hour left, and I want to keep some time for some questions, if possible.
Yes, thank you so much, Raful. That was really helpful to help us understand some of these issues, and they're very complicated. And I wanted to underscore something you said when you were explaining some of the status and the family reunification issues, which is that Palestinians are not immigrants on their own land, and yet that all these regulations ultimately treat them that way. And I think for Americans to be able to understand that this is unjust, that this is the reality. But I just, you had a question about family reunification. I think you definitely explained that very well, but maybe just to follow up on that, do you have a sense of how many Palestinian West Bankers might actually qualify for reunification in a given year, or is it almost impossible? Because it seems like it's a practice that's almost aimed at prohibiting this kind of, marriage.
It's the policy is definitely to try and deter people from marrying spouses from the West Bank and going through the process of family unification, because the process went from being an easy one prior to the middle of the 1990s to an extremely complicated process that has no end, basically. Because now the only thing that, even if a family unification now is approved, the only thing that the spouses from the West Bank can get is a temporary permit for many years, and the couple who are going through the process of family unification must initially apply to extend or to renew the family unification on a yearly basis until they reach about 10 years of marriage. Then they are giving, the spouses from the West Bank is given a permit for 2 years. Again, every 2 years they have to apply for a renewal, and it is only when the spouses from the West Bank attains the age of 50 that she or he is given temporary residency. And it was only recently that the State of Israel decided to give these spouses who from the West Bank and who are going through family unification and have a valid permit, state health insurance. Of course, they have to pay for it, but it's like everyone else. And about 2 years ago, they decided to allow them to drive an Israeli registered car. You have to keep in mind that these couples that are going through the process of family unification are a permanent threat of losing the application or having their application refused if anyone in their family gets a criminal or security record. Even if they themselves are free of such a record, then the family unification application will be stopped. And it happened to many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's very troubling. I mean, that's a guilt by association with a family member. This is not something that in the United States, for instance, if you have a family member who commits a crime, it does not affect your own status. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So let me change topics a little bit. We had received a question about the Palestinian NGOs who were declared to be terrorist organizations in October 2021. And so the question was, can you comment on this move by Israel? How has it impacted human rights work among Palestinians and in the Holy Land more broadly? And, sort of, should there have been more opposition to this from the international community?
Well, declaring these 6, in fact, there are 7, because one was declared as terrorist before them, and the total is 7. Of course, declaring these organizations as terrorists, despite the fact that the EU and even the United States government said clearly that they conducted their own investigations and found that they are not terrorist organizations as Israel claimed, affected the work tremendously. Of course, there's the attempt to prohibit or to scare human rights organizations from doing the work, both Israeli and Palestinian, has been going on for many years. And the state of Israel has introduced laws that makes it more difficult even to Israeli human rights organizations to conduct their work. But they have not declared them terrorists the way they have declared, the state of Israel has declared some Palestinian human rights organizations. This, of course, causes fear and confusion amongst human rights organizations. After all, human rights organizations are not doing anything criminal. They are doing an important job of trying to help the Palestinian people cope, legally cope with the occupation, and many and others are trying to highlight the injustices that are being done to the Palestinians. So there are two types of human rights organizations. St. Eve's is the type of organization that provides legal aid to people. Other organizations like Al-Haq do advocacy work. Now, recently, even those organizations who have been providing legal assistance or legal aid to these to the Palestinians have been accused of abusing the system. In that, including St. Eve's, of course. St. Eve's was recently quoted as abusing the system by a couple of settler organization reports. In particular, when it comes to the issue of house demolition in Area C of the West Bank, despite the fact that we in St. Eve's and all the other human rights organizations are not doing anything illegal. We are working within the confines of the law as set by the state of Israel. We are not doing anything outside of that, and yet we are being attacked. Of course, this leaves uncertainty. This leaves a feeling of I don't know, discomfort, to say the least. And I personally have spoken to representatives of diplomatic missions here in the country about the matter, including the British, the Dutch, and even someone from the American embassy. It's important for them to know what's going on and to, I don't know, if need be, to interfere, because it's irrational in the situation under which the Palestinians live to leave them completely without any type of defense.
Thank you for that. And I think, yeah, it's important for that advocacy to continue, and also for to think about, when a country, any country in the world is suppressing the work of human rights activists, that this is a very bad sign, I think, for the state of democracy in that country. So for the state of Israel, this is not a good instinct, obviously, to be doing this to these human rights organizations. And we could say much more about that. I have a question here that's talking about how in the past, when the taxation issue came up, the church actually sort of protested this by locking the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that could also help us talk a little bit about the status quo generally. So during the recent holidays, during Easter, and then also in Ramadan, we saw lots of efforts to kind of go against the status quo in terms of worshipers being able to get into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Muslims being able to get to the Al-Haram al-Sharif, during Ramadan. So if you can talk about that also in terms of the impact of the violating the status quo by Israel.
Well, violating the status quo by Israel is, it goes. Of course, it affects the whole issue of taxation, but it goes beyond the issue of taxation, because it also affects the issue of freedom of religion and worship. Now, when it comes to Muslims, this year Ramadan coincided with Pesach, the Jewish Passover. And as you might know, Jews do go and visit Haram al-Sharif, and as they call it, Temple Mount. And the problem is that many settler groups call on social media for the Jews to go and do Jewish rituals on the in Haram al-Sharif, in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, this provokes the religious sentiments of Muslims because they regard the Al-Aqsa Mosque as the third holiest place to Islam after the Mecca and Medina, and they perceive or think that these extreme Jewish groups want to and they said it, they want to demolish the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and built in their stead the temple again. Now, the Muslims have not taken to this threat lightly, and whenever such calls are come out from these settler groups, many Muslims tend to go and be present in Al-Aqsa Mosque and try to defend it in order to prevent these groups from entering and doing or carrying out their threats. Hence, we have the violence and the demonstrations. When it comes to the Christians, it is particularly difficult during Holy Saturday, during the Orthodox Easter, when many Christians from all over the Orthodox world, but not only, gather in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in order to witness the Holy Fire ceremony and celebrate the rising of our Savior Jesus Christ on the day. Now, the Israeli police claim that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is a closed place and there is a risk of fire, and not many people can be inside of the church. That's all fine. That's fine. We know that the space within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is limited, and I think the studies show that a maximum of 10,000 people can be in there, but not more. In the past, people used to congregate in the yard outside the church and on the roof of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and on the streets around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, several years ago, the priests, I don't know why and how, some say it was in according to the request of the former Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, I don't know, decided to prevent people from congregating in the streets around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or on the roof of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or in the square that is outside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And even they started putting barriers on the new gate where people congregated outside of the old city, and started to allow certain numbers of people to gain access to the old city altogether. Now, the question that begs itself here is, how is it that prior to these restrictions that were imposed by the Israeli police, people managed to celebrate Holy Saturday without any police restrictions, even during Israeli even after 1967, when Israel gained control over East Jerusalem. Free access to the Church of the Sepulchre was available until about 10 years ago. And nothing happened because people mainly congregated outside of the church. Why is it that the police prevent people from accessing the streets around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the roof of the Holy Sepulchre? I don't know. It's I don't know. It's something that remains to be discovered, I would say. Now, about closing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre regarding the issue of taxation, I think this is a matter that requires the approval of all the churches that have custody over the church: the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Orthodox, the Catholics, the Franciscans, the Copts, the Syrian Orthodox Church. So no one church can close the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. All of them must agree and close it.
Okay, we're almost at our time. We're actually at our time, but you have a few more questions, so I'll at least ask you one more, and we can kind of close on that. You have some questions about Palestinian Christians' relationship with Jewish and Islamic leadership, international law, and how it can be applied. And then also about the sort of increase in the interest of Jewish Israelis to go up to the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif, and why that's changed. So you can address one of those if you want, but the one I thought we could close on is from Jordan Denari Duffner, and she's a member of the Catholic Advisory Council. And she's saying, as you know, many Americans are ignorant of the basic injustices and inequalities in Israel-Palestine, as well as its history. What are the most important things that you think Americans should know? So maybe if you leave us with something that is most important to you for Americans, and maybe in particular American, people of faith, to know about what's happening right now.
Well, I think it's important for Americans in general, and those Americans who are of faith. It's important for them to know, one, that there are Palestinian Christians. Secondly, that Palestinian Christians have lived on this land ever since Christianity began. Thirdly, that those Palestinian Christians are part of the Palestinian people. And fourthly, the Palestinian people has gone through a huge injustice, which culminated in 1948 and then again in 1967. They have to know that the Palestinian people agreed to establish a state of their own on 22% of historical Palestine, and yet Palestinians are not able to do so because basically there is no international willingness for them to do so. This is what I think. And when I say international willingness, I'm talking here about the American administration. The American administration, despite the fact that the current American administration says that it is for a two-state solution, however, practically on the ground, it's not doing anything to enforce its vision. What are the other two things that you mentioned earlier?
There were so many that I don't think we can get to all of them. So I think actually what you just shared is really, you gave us a little bit of a point-by-point plan. I mean, if there's anything else you want to share as a closing comment.
Well, we at the site of St. Eve's have been working for more than 30 years, providing legal assistance to the Palestinians in order to help them deal with the legal complexities that they live under. But not only, we have also been trying to help the poor get what their entitlements in order for them to be able to live with dignity. I think the work that we do is important, and I think that those who can share the information that they hear with others, it will be of great value. And if all of those who are interested to know more, they are welcome to visit our website. And there's an email on the website. If they have further questions, they are all welcome to send us their questions, and we will be happy to answer them. We recently started doing advocacy work as well. So anyone who can support us with that work will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you shared today. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but there's so much work that you're doing. And it's complex and it's very important. So in the chat, you do have the link to the St. Eve's website. So if you want to support their work by learning more and also by support, and then I think Nicole is also putting more information about CMAP upcoming events and things as well. And I just want to really, again, thank you, Raful, for the work that you are doing. It's so important. It's important for Americans and American Catholics to know that this is something that the church is doing in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land. And I think it's easy for many of us to feel hopeless about the situation. But when we hear about this courageous work that you are doing, the persistent work, and to help Christians to remain and all Palestinians to remain in the land, I think is very, very inspiring and makes us know that we cannot succumb to hopelessness. So you're in our prayers. We thank you for your work, and thank you to all who joined us today.
Thank you. Thank you.